So, yeah, everybody knows what we're here to talk about this morning, who we are. We're the Bodana Group. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization based out of York, Pennsylvania. I sound like you.
You do?
Holy
You're
crap.
good at this. We've been doing this for a while.
Jack Birkenstock is the executive director of the Bodana Group, so has his fingers in all of the pies, which I'm jealous of being a fat guy.
The point of the 501c3 is not to make pies, however. It's just
pies are just delicious.
It's a pie product of what we do.
Oh, that was awful. See, now that guy's shaking his head. He's like, I'm not even sure I want to be here anymore.
Too early. I'm done. No, formal introduction. I'm an MHS. I'm a master's level therapist. I've been in the field for about 23 years. I've worked education. I've worked recreation. I've worked in juvenile inpatient settings. I've worked in community-based settings with adults with disability. My typical focus outside of working with gaming is persons with sexually problematic behaviors. I've been doing that for about 18 years. But for the last 9 years with Bodana, we've been running private pay groups, varying disorders, conditions, issues, whatever buzzword that is comfortable for you. Some people like the word challenge, some people do not. And that's actually one of the things we're going to kind of get into. But we run board games, we run role-playing games basically for benefit mostly at the moment for folks with autism spectrum disorder or who experience autism, but that's not all that we do. We also use board games for persons in hospital settings, for people in old age, elderly care homes. So we pretty much believe that gaming is a bridge for many, many, many different things to occur that are helpful and beneficial. So that's kind of my CV.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So I'm James Kirk. That is my actual name. Yeah.
No fit.
Yeah. Yeah. So most people that I know just call me Captain. It's just what I get. That's actually my name. That's actually my name in our computer system at work. Like I don't, yeah. So I studied English and theater at York College, and then eventually after 20 years of doing soul siphoning work through warehouses and supervising and running forklifts and awfulness, I found a real passion. I now am the general manager for an escape room business. So I get to be a paid GM, and then I get to design puzzles and stuff when I'm not hosting rooms. So that was pretty cool. And about 5 years ago, I was doing a podcast called Grown as Gamers. And we were running games for various small organizations and conventions and doing tournament stuff. And then the four of us would just gab about games. And we got introduced to Jack, and I made point of contact. And what I thought was going to be a 10-minute phone conversation turned into a 90-minute conversation while I was sitting in my car. Probably from the outside looked like a John Hughes film. So we started talking, and then we hopped on board as the gag cast for Save Against Fear, and then over time, I'm not doing that podcast anymore, but now I've been working with the Bodana Group for the last 5 years. I do volunteer GM work. I help write scenarios that we use for our TTRPG sessions. I do some of the business stuff on the back end with them, human resources and whatnot. And then
Our podcast.
Yeah, and then I co-host on the TBC Presents GWI, which if you've ever heard an episode, that's an ongoing thing. It's the Bodana Cast Gaming with Intention. We focus on a game or a type of game or an RPG, and we actually present it not from the review standpoint of this game good, you should play, but we actually break it down into the different focus areas that we deal with, and then talk about how this game specifically develops certain types of behaviors or skills, and then give in-game examples because we have the game set up while we're podcasting, so that we can. Well, I should say video cast, but it's also in audio. But we try to show specific examples during gameplay of here's what we're talking about, so that everybody can get a practical application as opposed to just talking theory. So that's another thing that I'm involved in, and then more writing and other stuff like that. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess in general, we're going to go over what we're going to cover mostly today. One of the kind of cool things, just again, if you kind of walked in after we had said, we do have information about our organization over here on the little short tables. So please feel free to that. As always, we'll build in some discussion time and also some time at the end in case you have questions you don't want to voice to the whole group. It's totally fine. So today we're going to talk about autism spectrum disorders. This is not a clinical training, so please don't expect that, hey, I went to the Bodana panel and now I can work with it. Hold on, not so fast, not quite so fast. But what our goal really today is a couple of things. One, we want to demystify autism, and we'll talk a little bit about that through the presentation, that people have a lot of misconceptions about what it is to have autism or what autism is, because you know, in general, we speak in kind of general terms about, well, this is what this character looks like, you know, and we're going to show some examples of how media has kind of led us astray. But we're going to talk about some challenges, some strengths, how to handle crisis, how to be accommodating. But the biggest goal really is setting up for success, because the name of this series is called Everybody Plays. And this is just literally, it's the first of a number of series. We're going to do some that address, you know, gender identity and gender fluidity and how to be more respectful and responsible when you're setting up games or facilitating games, or even, again, if you're a proprietor of a game store. This is something you need to know. You know?
Also, eventually, like dealing with common issues that crawl up at a table if you're playing just a board game or an RPG, and how to deal with those situations in a way that doesn't make it completely oogie and uncomfortable. And oogie is a word.
It is totally a word. So educating and enlightening, becoming aware, responsive, being a resource. Truthfully, it's about making it an inclusive hobby, because one of the things that we're also going to discover is there's tremendous power in gaming, in what it can offer, and we kind of put that along the back burner of what autism spectrum disorders are. So here's the formal scientific DSM-style definition.
Also, if at any time during this panel, and this will fall on this guy because he's the one that has the degree in clinical, if he says something and somebody out there does not understand what he's saying, do this. This means terminology, okay? Just so like we can stop and give a quick like, okay, this is what this means, and then he can continue.
Yeah. And again, part of the demystifying is breaking down what the heck all this gobbledygook is. So it's a set of neurobiological developmental disorders, sometimes characterized by difficulty with communication, repetitive stereotypic behavior, restrictive or fixated interests, what some might call an obsession, and sensitivity to sensory experiences. So neurobiological, one of the biggest demystifiers that we talk about with autism spectrum disorder, this is not a choice. Okay, you don't wake up one day and go, well, today I'm going to be ultra sensitive to touch, or, you know, today your handshake may feel like you are setting my hand on fire, because that's how I want to be today. That's not how this works. Now, this doesn't mean that people can't learn to adapt and to adjust based on what they face personally, because one of the other kind of cool things that we talk about is we call it a spectrum for an obvious reason of everyone experiences it differently. You know, one of the things is what it was the phrase that we say.
So if you have gamed with, met with, spoke with, or even met somebody that has ASD, congratulations, you've met one person that has ASD, because it manifests completely differently, and there are unique circumstances for each individual that's on the spectrum, and that's something that we need to be able to recognize, because the strategies for gaming or including those folks is going to be different based on how they process information, their sensory issues, things of that nature.
How
so
it manifests.
It's different every time.
Yeah, here we have three of some kind of classic Hollywood TV examples. So we obviously have Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman from 1988. That was kind of one of the first major ways that people were exposed to the autism spectrum. And unfortunately, that's kind of what most people have kind of taken and walked away with. And when, everybody's, 15 minutes to walk now. And it's like, no, that was literally... Ironically, his portrayal was based off of one person, with autism that Dustin Hoffman actually spent time with and based his performance off of.
Yeah, and if anybody knows anything about acting, like Dustin Hoffman is what's called a method actor. So Dustin Hoffman took this one case, practiced it until he could do it in his sleep, and it was like breathing.
Yeah.
So that was the portrayal that he made. That's how method acting works.
Then we have Max in the Middle from a wonderful TV show, and of course Carl Grissom from CSI. A lot of people have said, because of his bug interest, that is his ASPE or his fixation.
Super intense guy.
Yeah, very, very, very into the bugs. But because it's infinite, we do want to break down a couple of the areas, specifically those that we might see more often in a gaming environment. So one of the first, and of course IT crowd is always great when we talk about social awkward. This is of course from Jennifer's party episode. But typical with social skills, that's kind of one of the high marks of autism spectrum disorder, is that we talk about like a lot of those, you know, because as you could probably tell more during the presentation, when I tell a joke that doesn't land, which happens a lot, my pun was a great example, right? One of the things that we'll see is that sometimes folks can't pick up on some of those facial expression changes that, you know, a lot of that, there's actually about, I think it's like 25 or 26 different facial permutations, whether it's the corners of your eye or the arch of your brow or the corners of your mouth. There are things that we are subconsciously picking up on during conversation interaction. There's also body language. We're going to kind of talk about the role of all that.
We had, like, just an example, one of our groups that we run, you were at our other panel, so we, we have a fan. One of the groups that we run is Dungeons and Dragons, and it's up to 16 players now. Yep. So we divide them regularly. But the last session that we ran, we have 3 new players, that this was their first full session that they were playing with us after character creation. And in the middle of our session, because there's 16 people and we have different groups, we were dealing with a scene that was involving some of the characters, and all of a sudden, all 4 of the facilitators, all 4 of us, heard this at the same time, but it seemed to go away. We heard the phrase, "I'm sorry, I don't know your social cues." So, like, the 4 of us just kind of, you know, because that's, that activates. And all that had happened was that somebody, like, they were just talking, like, kind of out of character, and somebody made some, you know, some kind of a joke or an analogy or something, and a couple of the people laughed that were there, except for this person who just didn't understand the joke. Didn't get it. Everybody else around him got it, but because everybody else was laughing, he got that whole, like, you know, I'm not part of this, and yeah, he had that defensive thing of like, was that a slight at me? Yeah. You know,
everyone else is laughing, I'm not, so am I the joke?
And then they had to assure him, like, no, it was, you know, it was just a general joke. It was not pointed at you at all. And then he responded with, "I'm sorry, I don't know your social cues." Yeah. You know, so it wasn't a thing. It was dealt with as soon as it happened. They self-policed, which was really great and something I really enjoy about this group. But for that kind of thing to happen, like, perfect example of how social cues can just not be ignored, but just plainly not be understood. Yeah. No fault, just happens, you know.
Because as we're going to find, kind of talking through the nature of communication, this whole idea of socialization is a very, very highly important, because it's all about communication, really. So one of the things that we've learned through studies, that we've learned through interaction, is communication is mostly nonverbal. So 55% of it is body language. So it's literally how I'm engaging, how I'm facing, how I'm standing or sitting, how I'm engaging you, how close, how far away, how many times I use my hands when I'm talking to you. 38% of it is tone of your voice. This is what we call semi-verbal communication. But still, neither of those 2 classifications is that rare 7% of what am I actually verbing to you? Like, what am I saying? What are the words that I'm using? Not necessarily the tone of them, because we're going to kind of go through what this whole difference between nonverbal and verbal is. So that means, let's think about this, folks. 93% of our communication, and this is everybody, right, is nonverbal. So when we talk about someone who is not able to pick up on nonverbal cues or signifiers, or may have a challenge in that area, that's hugely impactful. Go ahead.
I actually have autism and ADHD, and even with training, which is why I'm at the point that I'm at personally, is that I can pick up mostly on body language and tone. However, I lack capability to replicate some of that. So even with training where I get that communication, I don't fully understand how to replicate that tone of voice. Like, there are some friends who are just like, hey, a jackass, like, you know, they'll insult that friendly insult, and you look at that and you're like, wow, that seems like a really good friendship. I want to try that. And then I just insult them.
Hey, good morning,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to ask.
And and I'm like, oh, I heard the difference in the tone, but I don't know how to get that right.
Right. No, and those are some of the things. I mean, a lot of people talk about like you can't develop. Well, no, it's not that you can't develop. It's that these nuances are very difficult for everybody. When we talk about, you know, the communication being the most important survival skill for adults in the modern world, because we live in a very unique time. I guess that's a safe way to say it, right? But we live in a very interesting time where information is predominantly transferred in a nonverbal form. So I actually think it's kind of interesting that when I read a text or I'm reading a Facebook post from someone and there are no helpful picture memes to guide me to their emotional content, man, could some of those be interpreted kind of wildly?
Are they in all caps? Is this person yelling?
Even more terrifying, are they in all lowercase? What is that?
Yeah.
Is there any punctuation?
Have they decided just not to embrace the institution of capitalizing letters?
Or is there deeper meaning?
Yeah.
Is there a deeper meaning to all lowercase, or is that just a question?
Well, I don't. Well, when I like type, it's usually defaultly like shifted, and
Okay.
and I'm like, and in my head, I'm going, oh, they're showing their displeasure with me by clicking the shift and saying, yeah. Instead of it just
Okay.
being the normal, yeah, that they actually mean.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Definitely to a degree because. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, to add on is also in lowercase when people are typing online, but they're being facetious. Like even myself I'm a listener, and when people are typing and being facetious, it can still be really hard to understand.
Okay.
And my sister who's autistic, it's even harder for her to determine if someone's typing online and is being facetious about what they're saying versus are they saying this very literally and understanding it's even harder for her.
And that comes from that lack of tone of voice when saying those things. And the tone of voice will identify somebody who is being facetious versus somebody who is trying to give you some kind of a declamatory statement versus somebody that is trying to be vicious or mean or saying something in a mean-spirited way, which comes from that half-verbal.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
93%. Where did that number come from? I see you added it up.
That is.
Based on a study of something or something.
That is actually. It's going to be referenced from some of NPR.
Okay.
Did some organizations. There's a link in our notes.
Somewhere.
Yep.
Someone did a study.
I think it's on the reference page toward the end of it. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was just wondering,
No, that's a hell of a statistic. Yeah.
We did not, if anybody's a wrestling fan at all, we did not do Scott Steiner math to get there.
Nice. But I mean, just to kind of go into some of the finer points, because we want to make sure that we're getting to the strategies portion, but here's just some of the examples of body language that we're talking about. We have how your set of your shoulders is. You know, are they raised? Are they down? Are they lowered? Are they back? Are they front? facial expressions, hand positions, and again, all of these questions, like how do you know if someone's angry if they're not talking to you by the frowny face or whatever, that may not have anything to do with you. It may be I woke up on the wrong side of the floor this morning, so I'm just not in a good space. Now let's throw in, and again, we're not going to go into extreme detail about this, but just to kind of throw another little monkey wrench here, now let's talk about cultural competency. And let's talk about different cultural identifiers for respect versus what is disrespect. You know, in one culture, if I take change from a shopkeep directly, that's a tremendous affront versus the shopkeep being able to lay the change in front of me and then I take it myself. Different cultural boundaries, different expectations. The shame about a lot of this stuff is that these aren't necessarily things that we're taught, because then there's even further breakdowns of the semi-verbals. So a simple quote, I didn't steal the money from her. I didn't steal the money from her. Well, that might mean that I might know who did, or I might just be proclaiming my innocence. I didn't steal the money from her. I didn't steal the money from her. I thought about it, but I didn't. Okay? I didn't steal the money from her.
I borrowed it.
Yeah, exactly. I tricked her into giving me the money. I didn't steal it. She willingly gave it to me. I didn't steal the money from her.
Ate her lunch, though.
Yeah.
It was in the fridge, had her
Instead of
name
money
on it.
From her, I mean, her parents pay for everything she has, so it's really not her money. Okay? All of these subtleties and that inflection, you know, can change the meaning of the exact same set of words. If we cannot, as you were saying earlier, if that inflection or that tone behind that word, you could grossly misinterpret, or you could be grossly misinterpreted, which leads to a ton of misunderstandings. Because when we really get down to this whole idea of communication and socialization, I said earlier why it was important. The number one difficulty for anyone with an ASD or any other disability really is the isolation that they feel as a result of the diagnosis. The diagnosis itself does not cause isolation. Having autism does not isolate you. Having people around you that don't understand or cannot change the way they are towards you is what causes isolation. Okay? And bear in mind that isolation, ironically, the best way people learn to manage lack of social skills and social interaction is through increased social interaction. This is the whole reason we use something in the autism spectrum treatment community called social stories. Does anybody out there know what a social story is? Give us kind of a lay definition. You're shaking. Do you want to?
Well, my son comes home. I guess it can vary based on the interpretation of the person's mind. He had a small group setting in which the recognition of, at a very young age, recognition of emotional skills, and then, okay, well, how would you use that? Come up with a story, and then it could build out of that story into someone else, a new person in the group to be involved. I think this is what you're talking about.
No, you pretty much got it.
And that's, you know, that was really helpful for learning the really basics of how to read people. And that's kind of what it was.
Yeah, the idea is basically, and they use it at differing levels depending on, you know, the age of the person and how that person best learns. But the basic idea is we're going to write a social story about going into a game store. So we might include examples depending on the person's behavior set. What might look like if I'm too loud? What the faces on the patrons might look like. So now I'm saying, if you're doing this behavior, this is how people might react, and you actually want to use like actual photographs of people as opposed to like, you know, like clip art and crap like that. Yeah, yeah. It's literally, it's like a map. It's a rehearsal for you to be able to go, oh, that's okay. These are very helpful because let's think about a whole thing. How do you know when? Just as a weird question, when's the right time to have sex? What age? I'm sorry. Well, we'll go with that as well. But
Yes.
How do you know when your partner's ready?
Yeah. It's funny you say that because that's exactly the age I'm prepping my son as well.
Yeah. Good luck.
I'm explaining it and like, I'm going through that dad moment right now.
Yeah, that's a tough question because not only everyone's different. Every relationship's different. The day of the relationship, like that morning, is vastly different. And I only bring up these examples not as a reflection necessarily of autism specifically, but it is a bridge to understanding. That if we can understand, it's just so tough to read, like whether that person's ready or not. That's every day for someone with ASD in certain scenarios. So it's just one example. Go ahead.
It's also that, sorry to bring back, but so for example, I've got like small social interactions down, but that's one subset of the social arena. Dating, interviews, romantic, these are all different, entirely different social cues. Just like an individual with autism might go, oh, everyone likes being hugged, everyone likes kisses. He's also in a relationship though. Oh, why are you mad? I'm doing good. Like,
Yeah.
It's so hard, and it can be different aspects that affect it, such as the sensitivity even can affect whether
Temperature of the room. Yeah, there's so many factors that go into a lot of this.
He's not actually referring to the Fahrenheit or Celsius of the room. I just want to, I know he said like a lot of factors can define this, but it's not like the actual, like, you're warm, so it's different. It's yeah, temperature of the room is just the general feel of the room, the energy of the room, the feeling that you get when you're walking in somewhere.
So I mean, we want to get to kind of some of the real kind of meat and potatoes of this here. So I'm going to go through some of the clinical stuff. Again, restrictive or repetitive behavior. This is, the insistence upon routine that we talk about a lot. And again, this doesn't mean a person cannot learn to accept change or difference in routine. It's like any other muscle or any other skill. The more we practice it, the better we get at it. This doesn't mean I'm always going to be 100%. And again, using examples for folks who are not on the spectrum, there are days that I'm great in meetings. There are days that I shouldn't come to work. That just happens because #life, right? It's just one of those things. And there's also a lot of strengths that we see. So very logical thinkers, sometimes that lack of abstract and that concrete can actually be a benefit, not a hindrance. Amazing amount of information about interests or focus areas. Again, not gonna, it's not story time with Uncle Jack and Uncle James. All y'all can see the slide. It's just these are some of the benefits that we see. So we don't want to totally look at autism spectrum disorder as a negative, okay? Because it's not. One person's strength can be another person's weakness. I myself have bipolar mood disorder as well as severe ADHD, okay? That's just what I have. Doesn't make me better or worse than any other human, but I know I have challenges.
Anxiety and severe depression. That's my thing.
We're here. Self-disclose for the win.
Yeah. So you sit down at a game table with 5 other people and you're about to play a game, and how do you know that one of the people at the table has ASD?
He has the autism rash. No?
Maybe there's a shirt or a button. Yeah. So,
have you gotten your tattoo yet, sir?
So you can't. You have no idea. And that's really, if you take nothing else away from what we're talking about today, what I personally really would like people to come away with is the fact that that's not a problem. Like, the way that you treat somebody with ASD should not be different from the way that you treat other human beings, because that's what we are.
Yeah.
As this Everyone Plays initiative will continue to attest to, like, this is everybody sits, everybody games. Now, there may be folks at your table that will eventually give you a reason not to, right? But they should at least be given that opportunity. So be respectful, be compassionate, be kind. That's how we develop relationships. When we're talking about developing relationships with people, those are the key things. One of the other panels that Jack spoke on, someone at the end of the panel asked, you know, how would I, if I have an interest in doing this, get into this field of work? And the unanimous thing that everybody told them is make friendships. Don't network. Make friendships, make relationships with people, because that your ability to connect with people is what shares your passion, shares your interest, and makes you a caring and interested person.
And it also, forging those relationships is also how we learn some of those individual. You know, I can't learn how to talk to women 101. Well, every woman's different. So how I talk to one person who is, you know, female, identifies as female, what have you, is going to completely different from like the millions to billions and billions, you know, to pull a Carl Sagan here. So it's different, okay? Now, the other thing we want to highlight as far, before we talk about strategies and things like that is, and this is a very big, there's a lot of struggles in the autism community, okay? There's, come on in and join, we still got seats. Oh, okay. We are not, when we say the word treat, we're not curing. This is actually a big point of contention right now between the Autism Speaks movement, telling about, you know, we want to cure autism. No, you don't. You don't cure any mental health condition, issue that is of behavioral health. You manage, you help be more understanding. You don't cure it. We don't make it go away, okay? So, and that kind of works on both ends. So, you know, on one hand, this is one of those kind of weird points about inclusivity is about me learning your rules as it is you learning my rules. So it's kind of about coming back and forth, and this is just a minor thing that we talk about managing conflict. So
the worst thing that you can do if somebody starts to get agitated, and this is really, learn this because this is just general interaction, do not say the words, calm down.
Yeah,
no.
That's the worst thing to say when someone needs to calm down. Just don't tell them to do that. Help them calm down by you remaining calm. Yeah, hey, come on over here for a second. You want to go for a walk? Is that cool? So when we talk about managing conflict, there in a very general sense, there's 3 layers of conflict that we talk about with behavioral management. There's what we call basically annoying behaviors. So it's something someone does. It doesn't hurt anybody. It doesn't disrupt the flow of daily operation. It might be a noise or just like a clicking of a pen is a perfect example. Some people just like clicking it for the physical movement. Other people are like, dude, it sounds like I'm standing next to a waterfall of like tom drums. Please stop. That's an annoying behavior, disturbing behavior. Then we have disruptive, which is stuff that gets in the way of the daily flow. We're mainly talking here about destructive, which are behaviors that are violent, okay? Having any sort of mental health or behavioral challenge, never an excuse for being destructive. I've actually worked in a lot of settings where people say, well, that's just how he's manifesting it. What? But he's hurting people. That's not okay. That's never okay. So we need to kind of teach some of those ground rules, but to do that, we have to learn how to manage conflict. And a lot of that is being consistent, you know, specifically if you're in a game store. Every game store has their veterans. I often, what's the whole joke, if game stores could fly colors like bike clubs, man, would we? You know, I'm over at Clara's Dice Hut, man, you know, we wear the red and green, you know, and it's like, well, I have rumbles, you know, it's like some old bizarre West Side story.
Cross game for tournaments, who will win?
Yeah.
I actually, my wife and I had a joke idea about doing a gamer version of the Warriors, where it's basically like the RPGers having to fight their way back through the different gangs of like the minis during the LARPers and the, you know, somebody kills these sirens.
The different families of the game store mafia. Yeah.
There actually was something like that in a cartoon. I forget what it was. It's the recent cartoon, African American kid, Craig Street or something. Anyone? Thank you.
Oh, nice. What is it called again?
Craig of the Creek.
Craig of the Creek.
Yes.
Interesting.
Write that down.
I would definitely write that down. So in general conflict, the whole idea is to maintain safety, keeping things one-on-one in terms of interaction, because why a person does something is what we call in the behavioral biz triggers. Everybody has a trigger. It's not the explanation as to why you made the decision. That's one clarification we always want to make. A trigger doesn't mean you did this, so I have to do that as a result. No, we always have a wondrous cascading choice of options to us. But we have to understand that there are certain triggers that are common to autism spectrum disorder. And let's think about these in a game store. Does your game store have carpet or hardwood floor? That could change someone's day dramatically. Is it right next to a busy highway, or is it kind of one of them tucked away in the middle of nowhere kind of places? Okay, are the tables very close together? Is there a lot of space? What is the lighting like? Okay, how many people are usually there? You know?
Does it have a particular smell? Is it Lysol? Is it,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah.
Yep. So triggers are different for everyone. And in general, the main reason that we talk about this, because we really want to get into like the real ebb and flow here, is inclusivity is important, safety is also important. So just because someone has ASD does not mean that they have different rules or get treated differently. Part of the idea of inclusivity is about treating people unilaterally. That does not mean we don't understand and we can't make accommodations, but there are certain conditions or situations that we would call non-negotiable. If you hit someone, that is a non-negotiable. That is not okay under whatever circumstance, except maybe self-defense. But just out and out, I'm mad at you and I punch you, that's not okay no matter how bad of a day you're having. Part of that is self-management.
And a lot of this on the third bullet point I want to focus on is the fact that you really do just, like we're trying to understand where people are coming from. It's not, we're not training you to deal with everybody that has ASD, but just reminding you that if you can understand somebody's perspective, that goes leaps and bounds toward being able to include anybody that you meet into whatever gaming activity you're involved in. Yeah, so thinking about how you run or participate your tabletop or role-playing games, think about everybody, does everybody have like a gaming group or somebody that they regularly play with? Okay, so take a moment and think about the way that your group runs on a regular basic function. You know, everybody comes in, somebody brought Doritos because they're wonderful. By the way, Cool Ranch, or they can get out. And then,
No preference.
you know, like everybody like sets up, open up your dice bags, pour them out, dice clack and hit the table. There's some socializing beforehand, and then eventually, you know, like somebody probably calls the session to order, more or less. Sometimes in a very artful manner where your GM, you guys were just totally cool, just kind of hanging out, everything was fine, and then your GM just out of nowhere goes, all right, everybody roll initiative. What? You know, so, you know, those kinds of things, and then how you guys communicate and you interact. Now take that with somebody that hasn't joined your group before, hasn't played with your group before, you don't know anything about them, they're a new person. Do you do like a quick subset of the basic rules? Or do you, as the game progresses, say to them, okay, now here's a thing that you can do, which can interrupt or stop the gameplay? And for people that are focused on wanting to play the game, that can be very agitating for them if they have to stop every so often to explain a new rule that they're already familiar with.
Well, there's even with that, there's the situation. We one of the things that we do with our whether it's our board game groups or our role playing groups is we actually make it a point to involve our friendly local game stores in our programming, because one of the things that we have always kind of believed is most organizations and most support systems pretty much always kind of consist of like it's the same 20 to 25 people who meet up once a month or twice a month for different, like this time we'll go bowling, this time we'll do this. And you kind of spend time with the same people, which is good because you're developing some familiarity. But one of the things that we've noticed is that the ability to what we call globalize that or transport that from one setting to another. So now you're kind of making those skills, you know those 20 people, great. But if I throw you in an unfamiliar situation, you're kind of screwed, okay?
One of the groups that we worked with, we do like a single sheet that people fill out before they do a group with us. And one of the things on there are focus skills. Like, what are the things that you want to personally develop that we can include in the game for you to give you an opportunity to do so? And a lot of the kids that filled these out for this group, a lot of them wanted like a social structure, teamwork, the ability to interpersonally communicate with others, deal with change, sharing the spotlight, all those things. So Jack and I decided at one point that we were going to create a situation where we had split the table up for weeks, and they had been working with the same 5 or 6 players in that group, and then we took them to a local game store, and we gave them a little time to become acclimated to the store and gave, quote, like shop around, and some of the things that you don't think about that might be important to people, we would tell them, like the exits are located here and here for the store. The restroom is located here, in this place. Some people just want to know that, like, where do I leave? When I get there, in case I need to do so quickly, knowing that option is there, that they're not trapped once they've entered this new world. And there were some other gamers and some other people there that were doing things, and they're walking around and looking at stuff, and there's a sea of tables. So we had them set up at these tables, and then we decided, because we were throwing them into a wizard's cave, that we were going to make them randomly roll when they entered it, and it was a teleporter, and the teams got randomly assigned. So now they're in a new environment, and we've taken these teams that they're used to, and we've played a shell game with it. And then we had to give them a little bit of comfort and something to physically focus on. We designed physical puzzles with like sliding blocks and different sorts of ciphers and things of that nature. But they had to solve those puzzles, and we gave them things that they could physically fixate on, almost as a comfort food of some type, so that they had some way to process and release at the same time. But then we told them that these puzzles were going to be solved in real time, and we gave them a timer. So they had to work on these things in real time to be successful with people that they weren't used to working with in a place that they hadn't been before.
Yep. Now,
at the end of the session,
yeah.
We got done, and they were successful, and they did great. And most of them honestly stayed within their characters, and it's because we gave them enough time before this to get used to the characters that they were playing and get used to their game skin, so to speak. And at the end of the session, one of them we're cleaning up, and he's got a big smile on his face, and he looks at Jack and he goes, "I know what you guys are doing." And we're like, "Okay." And we're like, "Yeah? What's that?" And we were like, "We're cleaning up, And he's like, "You guys are trying to get us to work together better in stressful situations." And we're like, as facilitators, we're like, yes, that is exactly what we're doing. And that was really cool. But we had to, by thinking about how our game normally is structured, and then and this is obviously like an intentional example because we were running a therapeutic group. Like, this is not, you wouldn't do this if you weren't doing some kind of targeted therapy. But, taking a look at how our game group functioned, and then at the basic level, changing it just enough to give them a different kind of environment to play in, because that's what they were looking for. And at the same time, for a local game store, it gave them an option now where they know of a place that they had a good time, that they enjoyed themselves, and they felt included at that place. They're going to be more willing to go back and visit that place again. And it develops that ability to then stretch out their social circle just a little more.
Keep in mind, there's also the fact that now they know the clerk. At least if it's small enough, they now know the owner.
Yep.
So that initial walking into a store, like,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
they're staring at me because
Yep.
now that's gone. So they can now enter a place that caters to their hobby without anxiety, or at least deeply reduced.
The whole point of this slide in general and this whole process is just think about things that we sometimes maybe take for granted in our regular game. I mean, one of my favorite examples of what could be called the therapeutic benefit of role-playing games or, board gaming in general is con life. I'm sitting down for a game. I'm committing to the next 4 hours with a group of strangers. At the end of that, we might be exchanging phone numbers or emails because, man, that cool thing that we just happened, it's like being stuck in an elevator for someone for a couple of hours. You now have an experience that you can only talk about with those 5 or 6 people. That makes that a very unique opportunity because now you're forging, like you said, you're forging connections. So when we talk about things that might cause stress or might be triggers for people, we want to think about the game store. The physical environment. We touched on a couple of these earlier, so I'm going to kind of go on to the next one. But, Pokemon versus Magic. Does your store have Magic and Pokemon? There's a big difference between a bunch of screaming kids and a bunch of very fixated, focused adults.
As far as I'm concerned, everybody better start running Keyforge.
So how gaming can help, and this is actually a photo that we took at one of our board game events held in one of our local stores that's in New Holland, PA. It's called 6 Feet Under Games. And one of the cool things about 6 Feet is they reserve table space for us. And the local organization is called the Tommy Foundation. They basically help finding supports and strategies for parents and families who are experiencing autism. So we run board game clubs there. Half of the year it's at a college, the other half of the year it's at the game store, because this social context of the environment promotes so much opportunity for learning.
And it's cool because it's a family-oriented thing. So like not only the individuals themselves, but like they can bring their mom and dad with them, and we can sit down and we run games with all of them. And we just play games for like 2 or 3 hours, and we, at some point we pull the parents aside and we're like, yeah. So and we kind of discuss, like what do you see that your child's doing that's maybe something that they didn't do normally? What do you see this developing? Do you feel like this is something that's valuable? And we can discuss things from there.
Yeah, and it builds a lot of the things, when we talked earlier, for those of you who kind of walked in a little bit after the start, the whole idea of the...
And we're not judging.
Not at all. Gaming with Intention, the Bodanicast, the podcast that we have on YouTube. One of the big things about this is talking about natural opportunities and opportunities via the game. The luck of the die or the dice hate me evenings that we seem to happen every now and then. That's a resiliency. We're developing social skills, going to agree upon a game, dealing with collaboration and conflict resolution. Raise your hand if you've ever had to discuss, and I might put discuss in heavy quotes, a rules clarification. Pretty common circumstance. You're dealing with, in some cases, with like 30, 40-page rule books. I'm pretty sure at one point, wait a minute, that's not covered.
We had it last night,
Yeah,
just at our table. Something happened in the game. It was really early on. I had read the rule book and I was ready to run the game. And the first time it happened, everybody looked at me at the table like, this doesn't seem fair to the players, because it's all the players versus one other person at the table. And I'm like, that's what the rule book said. And then the second time it happened, this guy gives me the sideways glance, and he's like, it doesn't seem fair. I was like, do you want to read it? It's right there. Okay.
No, we're cool.
And then they won, so now we don't talk about it anymore. Yeah.
Well, I don't bring it up anymore. I'm fine. So how gaming can help, this is obviously just another, for the benefit of folks who'd want to talk, we're developing social networks, support systems. These interactions are social stories. They're living social stories. We learn how to deal with people by being around people. Yes, that's uncomfortable sometimes. But that inclusion reduces isolation. When we have that accepting environment, that we have. You know, that game store is like a home away from home for a lot of people. Okay, it's for a lot of folks. Like, you know, you grow. Oh my gosh, I've been gaming with this kid since he was 6 years old, and now he's getting married and whatever. And it's like, oh my God, like you have these weird lineages and dynasties that are gonna happen. Go ahead.
Actually, going back to the fact that you guys bring in the parents, I actually adore that because a lot of the times, like for example, when I was 7, I wasn't at the point where I was like expressing.
Okay.
So some parents have a lot of trouble connecting with this child who doesn't have emotions displayed on their face or other such things like that. So having them interact in a game, and it's kind of a familiar context for the parent. I'm playing something with a kid. It can help a bond that might have been weaker.
Well,
Yeah, there's something like it's a very interesting dichotomy, this, because you had said that you were a sports coach, and you know and an educator. When you're a coach and you're dealing with a sports team, the parents only want to be too involved in what's going on. They're very proud of their athlete, and not that parents are not proud of their kids if they're on the spectrum. But the thing with that is, if they're getting help from someone, or if somebody is willing to work with their children, now I see more often parents become the, oh my God, I'm so glad that you're here to assist with my child's thing. Just tell me what I need to do.
yeah.
And that's where,
You know?
that's exactly what my video game book of American started. And I was under a car. I was under a car. Focus, or are we good? We good. All right. I was under a car working on literally wrenching on a Volkswagen Beetle, and I couldn't reach the screwdriver to adjust something. My son ran in the garage and ran out of the garage, and on his way out, I said, "Can you hand me that screwdriver?" My legs are literally hanging out, stepping over, he's right there. He squats down and looks at me upside down, and he goes, "Well, my hands will get dirty, Dad," and wiped his hands off because he's a sensory kid. He takes off running, and I'm like, I lost my mind. I was crying. I mean, I didn't come out from under the car for like 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, it felt like it was under the car in the hall.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I can't connect. I physically can't connect. So that's when I pushed the video games, and I was in Walmart and said, "Hey, shout out, 10:30 tomorrow, I'm going to field." The rest of the story is interesting, but
Oh yeah.
that's literally the link. Jock dad, ASD's kid's son. And then how do you explain to him that he's on the spectrum and he's not a normal?
And it's not out of a lack of pride or a lack of love or anything like that, but it becomes that I can't connect, so now it's something scary, and if you don't have an answer as a parent, you start to panic, and you start to have that, like, I don't know what to do. And then somebody comes along and says, I'm willing to work with your son, daughter to help them engage more. And then you're like, subconsciously, something in your head says to you, okay, they're going to fix them, or they're going to take care of them. And that's not the case. The whole idea of therapy and development is to be able to continue to grow with them, alongside them, which is why we really, really encourage parents to come to these things. There are times where we do trainings where we'll talk to the parents separately while the kids are playing games, and we give them these strategies and these things that we talk about, and then the last hour we bring the parents into the room where these kids have already been gaming and having an awesome time, and then we integrate them, and we're like, this is what we're talking about, like just the ability to see a practical application with their children doing this thing that we've been talking to them about for an hour is super powerful to watch happen. So I don't want anybody to feel like, especially, there are folks of you here that are on the spectrum, I don't want you to feel like we're telling you that your parents didn't care. Like, that's awful. I want you, but again, understanding somebody's perspective. Being a parent of an ASD child myself, like, that's early on, I had to learn the ropes too. You know, I had to say to I've said to myself, like, okay, they're going to fix her and it's going to be fine and she's going to talk soon, you know, and she's still mostly nonverbal, but signs, and has a communication assistance device that she pushes the button and it says the thing. So that type of stuff. But
No. I mean, it's going to kind of, because we want to make sure to save a couple minutes for any questions that folks might have. So, I mean, some recipes for success, and these are kind of things that are kind of picked from, you know, global managing strategies and stuff that we've learned. So one, be consistent. Yes, I know at every game store there is the veteran group, the people who literally have been coming there every day since the doors open, and that's great. But if you have a rule, no sexually inappropriate humor, don't let Dave slide because Dave's there every day and he gives you $400 in sales a week. That's not okay. Because if we're trying to teach routine, consistency falls with routine. So if I get called out on a rule, but good old Dave doesn't get called out on that rule, well, we have a problem. And as either a proprietor or as even a game group, if there's consistent rules about what's okay, I mean, we talk about, you know, X cards and lines and veils and all these wonderful things about, you know, like consent in gaming and acknowledgement and agreement. Let's really kind of put our money where our mouth is here about the idea that if we're going to set a rule for the table, everyone needs to follow that rule. Because when we set rules, we teach. And if we follow those rules consistently, that educating and that teaching is more consistently applied to that person. Identify any difficulties early, be compassionate. We've talked about a lot. You know, every bit of dignity to a person on the spectrum is with any other person, okay? We're not different. Our biggest one is don't assume the difficulties are, you know, you're having a bad autism day. Don't do that. That is just as bad as another highly offensive, what are you on your, you know, again, not going to directly, but you all know what I'm talking about. It's rude to assume why someone's having a difficult day. Maybe you're having a bad moment because I said something that I wasn't thinking through. It's okay to be a little bit humble. In general, the rule, be excellent to each other, right? So have store rules, apply them consistently. Provide a quiet area. This is one of the more difficult things that I know that we have an AFK here through takethis.org, which is basically like a DSTIM or a downtime room. So you know, if you're a bit overstimulated, you can go to the AFK and you can, you know, have that quiet area. Sometimes, you know, a lot of our hole-in-the-wall kind of game store locations that don't have a lot of space, you want to maximize that retail space so you have the most product you could sell and the most gaming space. That may not provide for a quiet area, but maybe some of your players might need that. So it's just a consideration. Respecting need for space and time. Again, I think in general we've covered most of these, and then just for, here are the references. So any questions from anybody in the room? Go ahead.
So my sister has autism. She's turning 19 in May.
Okay.
And she really likes playing games, and I've also suggested about like trying to get her into more social games and everything, coming more to cons.
Okay.
Trying to get treatment throughout her life from family and friends that have pretty much, because of her autism, have all her students. She's really manifested this idea that she's secret, and it prohibits it. She has this fear of engaging in social games.
That's why that isolation we talked about earlier, that's how it starts.
I was wondering, as her sister, what are things I can do to try and help alleviate that and to help her feel more comfortable in getting into social games?
Well, one good starting off point could be figuring out what interests or maybe properties that she has interest in. Like, for example, you tell me a thing she's into, whether it's like anime style or a certain movie franchise or whatever, I could probably find you a game that'll fit that. The selection of the type of game, like games that are cooperative for play, are games that are naturally going to encourage social interaction. Marvel Legendary or the Harry Potter deck builder are great examples of games that actually you have to interact to play the game successfully because just strategy. So now it's not like, okay, now we're going to work on our social skills, guys. It's now let's play Marvel Legendary. Hey, what do you want to do in 2 turns?
There are so many more games now than there
Oh
used
my
to be
gosh, yeah.
even like 2 or 3 years ago that are now cooperative. Like they're just fully cooperative games. That's where I would focus. You don't want to do anything that is that has a competitive element to it, that if she loses the game, she translates that into, well, it's because I'm stupid that this happened. You want to target games that are cooperative so that everybody that's playing the game works together toward the goal, so that if you do lose the game, because the game hates your face, and they just like you just lose, that it was the team that lost as opposed to her actions that lost her the game. You work together and everybody succeeds, or everybody fails. And in failure we learn. So I would target a lot of different types of cooperative gaming. And everybody uses this as their Bible, but if you look on Board Game Geek and look for cooperative games,
Yeah.
they're all over the place.
Role playing is also not a bad idea because role playing is also an inherently social activity. And it also, because of a lot of the players being around the table, there's also a lot of resiliency work. Like everyone fudges a roll now and then, or it botches something that they're trying to do. So there's kind of an innate. And certain systems, like we were mentioning Kids on Bikes earlier, there's also systems like RetroStar, the Fate system, powered by the Apocalypse.
World Engine.
Yep, Dungeon, yep. So there's a ton of great games that really help, that really help illustrate this whole idea of, okay, I didn't make the roll. Let's kind of see where we can go with this, and let's still tell the story and kind of narrate how the failure can work into success.
Yeah,
So there's
that's
even opportunities there.
one of the strongest things that you can do with that, because you're looking for some type of positive reinforcement. If you can use games that don't treat like a D20 system where I rolled the die, I either made the roll or I didn't make the roll, and it's a very hard fail, succeed. There are systems that have that built-in inherent thing where you can fail the roll, but something happened that might set you up for success on the next go-around, so that you can demonstrate that failing does not mean a lack of success. It just means that the first time you did something, it didn't work out the way that you wanted it to, might be able to make lemonade.
Yeah,
that type of thing.
Definitely one option. All right.
Sure.
Sure. Other questions? I know, are we okay on a little bit of?
It is 11 now, but if you had another question.
Okay.
Would that be cool? All right.
Oh, I was
Our question.
adding on that.
Sure.
Games where cheating isn't like the end all be all. Like it's not a huge investment. Like Cobalt Save My Babies is it's humorous.
It's level 9, correct?
What?
Is that level 9 games?
Oh, I can't remember honestly.
Okay.
I've really only played it once.
Okay,
The
'cause I
thing is,
think-
Cobalt
yeah.
Save My Babies is you're losing these kobolds who are stupid, and you are either after chicken or baby. to feed this game. King's Court, King's Court. I say that every time you say King's Court. But it's very obviously silly. And they're meant to kind of be bad. So it's not a huge thing when you die. It's not a huge thing when you fail. It's humorous instead. So it's kind of what would be considered a beer and chips game, where we're not selling down for this heavy RPG, dark story, or anything like that. It's just, we're just playing these goofy monsters trying to cast, and it's so rare that anyone makes it through that you actually get points to use for your next character. So it's like hard. There are games like that where it's just more of a goofy social interaction, which lessens the bulk of the game.
Yep.
Cobalt ate my babies.
Cobalt
Yeah,
Ant Man.
it is.
Yeah.
It is level 9 games. I'm pretty certain because they just recently released a game called Knuckle Sandwich, which was kind of based around a lot of that idea there. So
One more thing that I want to mention, and then we're gonna stop, and we'll be happy to talk to anybody that wants to continue discussion out there. When you play these games with her, I would at some point introduce something that is a little more meaty and has some more rules to it once she's built up her confidence a bit, because you can then point to the fact that she has learned a complicated system of rules and that stupid people can't do that.
yeah.
Like use it to reinforce confidence building and the fact that like she has retained all of this information, and if she was somebody that was quote stupid, she wouldn't be able to retain this information and be able to use it. So you can eventually build confidence and then get into more complicated things later. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome.
No problem.
Thanks everybody for coming this morning.
Here's all of our contact infos as well as some of the things that we offer. Like we had said earlier, we are based in York, Pennsylvania, but have dice will travel. Of course, always ruse the day. So we do offer private pay groups in Lancaster. We're looking at opening those up to York and Harrisburg, maybe even Maryland. We run group services for agencies. We do board game groups, RPG groups, consultation and training. And of course, every year, and if you go to our website, and those who spoke up, please come up front. We always give you like a little giveaways and thank yous. We have information and wristbands. On one side is our name, the Bodhana Group, which means leads to an awakening or an understanding. It's a Sanskrit word from Buddhism. And on the other side is Save Against Fear, which is our annual game con that is run in October. That is in Harrisburg every year. So you can find all the information there. And again, thank you very much for waking up early on this Saturday at 10 a.m. Thank you.
Be well and game happy.